was born in Cambodia, in a small village called Pochentong, P-O-C-H-E-N-T-O-N-G, which is better known as the international airport. And I was born less than a mile from the terminal. So each time my wife, Martha, and I go to Cambodia, we land at my village. And we've been telling our friends that when you go to Cambodia, you go through my village first, before you see the rest of the country. I was born in the year of the boar, B-O-A-R, and that was 1948, on March 1st. I grew up there and I lived with my family, with my mother, my brother and my sister until they got married and they moved away, but I was with my mother until 1975, until the Khmer Rouge came to power. Well, 1975 was the year that all the turmoil began, but I would go back a few more decades before that. When I was growing up in the 50s and the 60s, Cambodia was a very peaceful country. And my father passed away when I was 9 years old in 1957. So my mother struggled to bring us up, my brother and myself. My sister already got married and she moved away. So when my brother got married, I was alone with my mother. So I was brought up by her, and I learned everything about life, about how to share happiness with others, how to make it in any circumstances from my mother. She was everything to me. In 1975, to answer your early question, that's when the Khmer Rouge came to power, and that's when the country was turned upside down. The Khmer Rouge came on April 17, 1975, and they ordered everybody out of the cities and urban centers. So you're talking about a few million people who were forced out at the same time. I was working for CARE, which is a relief organization, and I was told a few days earlier, in fact only a few days earlier, that I should be at the embassy within an hour if I wanted to be airlifted out of Cambodia. But I missed the last helicopter by 30 minutes because I went to a meeting with a governor of a province where CARE used to provide medical supplies, food and shelter to some 3,000 refugees. And I thought that by going to that meeting with the governor of that province, I would be able to save the lives of those people. So when I arrived at the US Embassy, I was told that the last helicopter had taken off 30 minutes before. So I missed the US evacuation by 30 minutes, and 5 days later the Khmer Rouge came and they turned the country into a land of blood and tears. So that was a very tragic milestone in Cambodian history. Well, I continued to work. I thought I would just continue to manage a program because I was in the management position. But when the Khmer Rouge came in, they forced everybody out. Those of us who thought that we would be able to work together, we would be able to speak the same language to rebuild a country was all wrong, and I joined my brother. We tried to seek shelter in the French embassy, but we were not allowed, so my brother and I went to our sister's house, our oldest sister, and everybody was there, including my mother, their children, and so on. So 16 of us left Phnom Penh, the capital, that day. And of all the 16 who left together, I'm the only survivor, because everybody was killed later on, including my mother, my sister, my brother, their families, their children, 15 of them. And I was with them for a few weeks, then my mother realized that I would be in danger. Not only that, but I would put everybody in danger because of my background. I spoke French, I spoke English, I went to university, I worked for an American organization. So those were unfortunately, the qualification that the Khmer Rouge were looking for. They were going to eliminate the entire education class. They kill anybody who wore glasses because that equated in intelligence. They killed teachers, doctors, nurses, government officials, military people, everybody who had not been with them during the war. So my mother gave me her wedding ring, her scarf, which I brought with me, and a bag full of rice. I found a bicycle and I began to ride a bicycle for about 500 miles from the southeastern part of Cambodia towards the northwestern part, which is near Thailand, because I couldn't go to Vietnam. Vietnam had fallen to the communists 2 weeks after Cambodia. So my only hope was Thailand, and it was about 500 miles away. It took me 3 weeks to come to an area near the Thai border. That way I was captured. I was captured by the Khmer Rouge. They tied my arms behind my back, and they were going to kill me that night, because they suspected everybody who were in that area to try to escape to Thailand. A truck driver whom I had met a few days earlier saved my life. He told the Khmer Rouge that I was an innocent person, that I was around looking for my family. I was let go, and I joined this unit, the trucking unit. The whole country was turned into a huge forced labor camp. And I was with that unit for a while, and then I was transferred to another unit. We worked, all of us worked 18 hours a day. We were given 1 bowl of rancid soup a day. Each night when I went to sleep, I never knew if I would be alive the following morning. But when I woke up, I realized I was still alive and still in Cambodia. I said I would make it to Thailand and to freedom. So Cambodia was turned into a land where there were only 2 kinds of people: those who had died and those who would die under the Khmer Rouge. I said that I would not want to be part of this, and I planned my escape since then, the very first day since my mother told me to run. And she said then, in May 1975, and she had been saying all of my life since I was growing up, no matter what happens, never give up hope. So that message, that wisdom remained with me, kept me alive under the Khmer Rouge, helped me move across the jungle to Thailand, to a refugee camp, and to America, to freedom. Well, making it to Thailand was not that easy, because the Khmer Rouge they put landmines along what they call the no man's land along the border. And also they heavily patrolled the area. And in addition to that, the jungle was very thick. It was very hard to get through. But I pray every day, every night when I went to sleep, I thought of my mother, and each time when I saw the full moon, I look at the full moon, because Cambodians believe that when you see the same moon, you are connected spiritually. It doesn't matter whether you're in France or in Australia, or in Brazil or in Colombia, if you look at the same moon, will you be connected? And I was looking for my mother's face on the moon. That's what we believed. You know, you look at the same moon, you try to be connected to your loved ones. So every full moon, I look at the moon, and I try to be connected to my mother. I continue to work, as I mentioned a moment ago, 18 hours a day. I did everything that the Khmer Rouge asked me to do, and just like everybody else in the whole country, 6-7 million people did that. In January 1976, the Khmer Rouge were looking for a crane operator, and I raised my hand. I said I was a crane operator in my previous life. I'd never been in a crane in my life. But I knew the job would take me to the border because they were going to use the crane to pick up the timber along the border and to bring them back to a sawmill, and they would make warehouses and so on and so forth. So at night I burned small candles and I put a blanket over my head, and I was able to study the instructions in English. That fact alone would have me killed if they found out that I could read. Not only that I could read, but I could read English. But like we said in Cambodia, that if your mother's milk is dear, you will survive, you will make it, you will have your wish come true. So on February the 13th, 1976, I was alone at the back of the timber truck. Normally they send 2 soldiers, one sitting with the driver with an AK-47, one sitting in the back of the truck with us, the crane operator and a mechanic. But that day only one soldier came, and the mechanic couldn't make it. So the Khmer Rouge soldier who came with us sat in the front with the driver, and I was alone at the back of the timber truck. On the way back, after we put the timber on a logging truck, I said, now or never. I could not jump to the left because the driver would have seen me through the rearview mirror. If I jumped to the right, then the Khmer Rouge would have seen me, and he always had his AK-47 on the ready. So what I did, I crawled on top of the timber all the way to the back, and I dropped myself behind the truck. And I was caught on a piece of lumber. I was dragged by the truck for a few hundred yards before I was flung off when the truck went over a rut. I picked myself up and I began to run, to walk, to crawl, to swim for 3 days, having nothing to eat or to drink. I fell in a booby trap, which is a deep hole full of punchy sticks, sharp bamboo sticks. These were to catch the unlucky victims at the heart or at the stomach. But I'm very tall for a Cambodian, so they hit me on my legs, and that saved my life. I pulled myself out of that hole, and I continued to limp along until I got to Thailand. In Thailand, I was jailed for illegal entry. They later realized I was an innocent person, so they released me and they transferred me to a refugee camp. In that camp, there were some 3,000 refugees living in an area the size of a soccer field. It was hot, humid, filthy. Most of them suffered severe mental depression because they sat around all day feeling sorry about the past and worrying about the future. So I thought I would do something to help them out. And since I was an English teacher in my previous incarnation, I organized English classes. So it was a win-win situation. They were able to learn some English, get some basic English before they would begin a new life in an English-speaking country like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the UK, and the United States. At the same time, they were able to take their sorrows and their worries off their minds. So on June 4th, 1976, I arrived in New England with my mother's scarf, an empty rice bag, and $2. I picked apples in Connecticut. I drove a taxi in New York, and then I went to work for President George H.W. Bush at the White House. 13 years, exactly from the time I jumped off that truck. in northwest Cambodia. Well, the refugee camps around the world are run by the United Nations, UNHCR. And the minute you arrive at the camp, you register yourself with the camp administration. In my case, I did that, and so they gave me a mat, a blanket, a bottle of fish sauce. That was my ration. And every day they would bring food to the camp, and since I didn't have anything to cook, I sort of invited myself to a family, and they were very friendly. They knew that I was all by myself, so a family sort of took care of me. So I gave the food to them, and they would cook the food for all of us to eat. And every few days they truck in water to the camp for people to bathe and also to cook. And every few days the Red Cross would send a medical team to examine our health and so on and so forth. So it was well taken care of, but at the same time the spirit, the thoughts, the mind of those people were just full of sorrows and worries. So physically they were okay, but morale was not that high. And we all wrote letters to friends and family, relatives overseas, and best time would be the mail call. So they would call over the loudspeaker your name, and you go and get the mail. Not until I arrived in New York 5 years later. No, there was no way to get in touch with my family. There's no mail, there's nothing at all. It was not until 1980, when I was at Columbia University, that I got a letter from a childhood friend of mine. He told me that he did go back to the village, and he learned that all my family members, including my mother, my sister, my brother and their children, were all killed by the Khmer Rouge. I did not know any human being in the United States. My connection was more to friends, because in my generation, as I mentioned a moment ago, I was very, very, very well connected to the mother country, so to speak. So I applied, when the UNHCR official came to interview me, I applied to go to France. But then people that had gone there before me told me that it's very difficult to find jobs in France. France was going through a major recession, and if I could, I should try to go to the United States. So I applied to come to the United States, and I had very little hope to come here because I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any connection with America. My former colleagues at CARE, one was at the time in Jakarta, and my immediate supervisor was at the time in Colombo. After they left Cambodia, the two of them were sort of joining hands in trying to bring me here, and I was in a very low category in terms of US immigration policy. But as I said earlier, because my mother's milk was dear, I was allowed to come to the United States. And the reason I went to Connecticut, because my former supervisor, who was in Colombo, she went to school with these people, Bob and Nancy Charles. So she wrote to them, she called them from Colombo and asked them to sponsor me. And I ended up in Connecticut with this lovely family, which became part of my family. Right. When I was flying into New York from Bangkok, I saw the Statue of Liberty when the plane began its final approach. And when I saw the Statue of Liberty, I knew I was a free man. And it's a great feeling to be in a free country, to be able to start a new life again from zero. I literally had $2, my mother's scarf, and an empty rice bag. But I was full of hope and promise. So I just wanted to be on my own feet. I was lucky. Well, let me just spend a little moment on the White House. In 1987 actually, I was interested in the process, political process. And when I arrived in Connecticut in 1976, I was watching the conventions with my host family. And I didn't understand what was going on. I saw people wearing funny hats, jumping up and down chairs, screaming, shouting, yelling. And my host family told me that this is convention, and these are delegates. They're going to choose two nominees, and we would elect one of the two nominees. And then they turned to me, they said, "Sichan, if you wanted to understand this country, you should get involved." So my chance to get involved was in 1987, when George H.W. Bush, the Vice President of the United States, began his campaign. And Martha and I were living in New York at the time, and I thought it would be a good process for me. I volunteered in the campaign in New York, and when George H.W. Bush got elected, he asked me to go and work for him in the White House. So that was probably one of the most important moments in my life, because here I was at the White House only 13 years from the day that I began my escape from Cambodia. That I made it that far from the killing fields to the White House in 13 years was a great tribute to America and to George H.W. Bush. And by that time I was already married to Martha. I met her only shortly after I arrived in New York in 1977. We were very good friends, and then friendship became romance, and romance became a very happy marriage. She's from here, from Texas, from a small town in the Panhandle called Pampa. So thanks to Martha, I was able to realize my childhood dream of seeing Texas. Because when I was growing up in Cambodia, I saw a lot of Western movies with John Wayne, Kirk Douglas, and Clint Eastwood. I love this can-do attitude of the Texans. And here I was meeting Martha and later married to her. So it was sort of a combination of luck and fate that I moved from Connecticut to Texas, and then from Texas to Washington, D.C. Very similar to what George H.W. Bush took his route when he moved from Connecticut to Texas, and then Texas to Washington. But as I said earlier, my mother's wisdom and message stay with me all these years. Hope kept me alive under the Khmer Rouge. Hope helped me move through the jungle of Cambodia, and hope brought me to Connecticut, to Texas, to New York, to Washington, and now back to Texas. Food, of course. I miss my mother. I miss my sister, my brother, and their children, and the food. Later on, I met a few Cambodian families, so I was lucky to benefit from their culinary expertise. December 12, 1982, I was sworn in Brooklyn, in New York, to be a U.S. citizen. But I should mention that I was a naturalized Texan before I was a U.S. citizen. Because I came in 1981, after I graduated from Columbia, and also because I met Martha in 1977, so I had a closer connection to Texas than to the USA. My first trip to Cambodia was in 1992. I was still at the White House at the time. We had just signed a peace agreement in Paris, a very comprehensive peace agreement. In October 1991, the United States played a very key role in putting that agreement together, and we felt it's important for us to go and see the preparation on the ground, because the United Nations was going to send the largest peacekeeping operation. Some 22,000 people were going to be in Cambodia to stabilize the country and also to organize an election. The State Department asked me to be on the delegation, and I of course asked my superiors at the White House. They said that's a good thing to do. So I went there with the US delegation in March 1992, just 1 week before they began the deployment. So I went to Phnom Penh. I didn't recognize the airport and the road from the airport to Phnom Penh, where I traveled by bicycle every day, 25 miles a day to go to school. Because things changed drastically, but 16 years apart. It took me a long time for everything to sink in. I was sort of numb for that moment. And I was able to go to Angkor Wat, where I pray in front of Angkor Wat. That's the picture that is on the cover of my book, Golden Bones. I was able to visit my father's village. The villagers knew that I had survived the killing fields, that I was now working for the President of the United States, thanks to Voice of America. They told me that you're truly a person of golden bones. So that confirmed my comments earlier that anybody who is very blessed, very lucky, is considered a person of golden bones. In fact, all of us here in America are people of golden bones because we are so lucky and so blessed to live in freedom and democracy. So that was my first trip. It was quite an emotional return, I should say, because I left 16 years earlier on foot, running through the jungle, falling in a booby trap, being wounded. And in 1982 I was returning in the US government plane as an assistant to the President of the United States. So the emotional gap was huge. And President Bush, when he knew that I was going to Cambodia, he sent me a handwritten note. And he used those words. He said, I knew this is going to be an emotional return for you. But call me when you get back. I want to have a full debriefing of what you saw there. So it's quite emotional, but 2 years later, in 94, I brought Martha to go to Cambodia, and since then we've been there once a year. And we try to go to the villages to see the real Cambodia, not just stay in the cities and hotels. And my idea was to show Martha, to show Martha the whole country. So we have only a few provinces left before she completes all of Cambodia.